Hello, welcome to Soulprint Insights. I'm really glad you're here today. For those of you who have been patiently waiting for new videos to come out on this channel, here's a new one. So, as most of you know, last October we lost our Siamese cat named Crystal. And at the beginning of April of this year, we lost Skittles, who was that very precocious white poodle that was often in the background of my videos, and of course loved doing the pet parades. And so I wanted to do a video about what happens when an animal passes. Like what process did they go through? What happens to their souls? So this is going to be channeled. I'm going to call on Masudius to see if he can shed some light on what happens to those, those companions that we have and when they pass. Because we know that they can come visit us, right? We know, we feel them, we see them, we hear them. And so we know that they're somehow still able to connect with us. So let's ask Masudius and see if he can give us some insights and some guidance into exactly what happens when an animal passes. So Masudius, if you could please come forward and give us some insight and some guidance on the process that an animal goes through when it leaves physical form. Well, thank you ever so much for affording us the opportunity to share this information and these insights with you. So let's start with the basic understanding that animals are in service. They are in service to the planet, to the people in terms of being a food source or a supplier of food. And they, of course, are, pets and companions. But irregardless, they are in service to the divine. They're in service to all that is. A bee, a humble little bee, could literally end most of your food supply if their numbers diminish and are vanish. So understanding that, when you get that, then you understand that when they pass, they really do not go through this transition period that a human soul goes through, because they don't have issues. Frankly, they don't have an ego. They don't really have a lot that they have to shed. So they literally go from being in physical form, their soul releases, it leaves physical, and it releases and it goes straight into sort of that divine consciousness. Now, there are times when you enter divine consciousness, you simply blend, you amalgamate into that source of energy. But as with humans, there is also that option of sort of staying in that in-between place. Now, we want to be careful that we don't really give it a name, because for many people, certainly when they are able to connect with those who have passed over, they consider them to be in heaven, or, some place that creates that energy. But you have to understand there aren't places. There is thought processes. There is energy. So it is from that place that an animal is able to connect with their human. So what happens is they pass, they go right, they don't transition as much as they just hop right to the next level. When they do that, they are then, again, they have the option of going straight into that divine consciousness. And that is very often what will happen with, insects, wild birds, animals that are used as a resource. But animals who have made that human connection, that love connection, they have the ability to join with those human souls and stay in that place where they are really, in some ways, we're going to use the phrase in between, but we don't want you to think that that means that that they're suspended or they're lost. It's just a place, it's a state that they are in between the time they leave physical body and the time they choose to sort of rejoin that consciousness. So when an animal soul passes, it goes straight into the light, okay? It goes into that energy. And at that point, it very often will stay in that sort of place because it wants to stay in touch with their human. It wants to perhaps offer comfort. Perhaps it feels that its service is somehow not completed, and therefore they want to stay in that form so that they can continue to visit or support whatever it is, the support those who have been their human companions. So that is why, you will often get sort of visitations, because they are simply in that place. And this, for both humans and animals, the point at which you can no longer connect or reach them with any degree of ease is once they really have joined into that divine consciousness and they've sort of made the decision that they're going to reincarnate, they're going to come back into physical form. That is when they sort of start going through that process, if you will, of re-entry. But that state, that in-between state, is where people do life reviews. It's where they go to rest and recover. It is where they are able to attune, gain clarity. It is only, and that is the light, okay? That is being in that light. And then secondary to that, at that point where they decide to come back, that, and human or animal, that is when they go into that sort of divine consciousness and they start the process to reentry, to go back into physical form. So in some ways, if you look at it like a 3-step process, perhaps it will help gain clarity. So 1, they are in physical form. 2, they're in the light, but they retain the soul print of, or the impact, the impression of what and who they were in physical form. And then when they are ready to re-enter physicality, they go into this divine consciousness. And that is where that reincarnation process starts again. And, you can understand there are some people who reincarnate, almost immediately after passing into the light. There are others who don't reincarnate for decades, and some for hundreds of years. It is dependent on what they are doing in the light place. And and again, as you know, if you've watched this channel, you know that very often those who are in physical form, when they pass, they then become guardian angels or guides who watch over and help those who are in physical form. That is why very often if you're getting a reading, or or if you have any other way of connecting with spirit, you will often be able to, you'll hear, oh, well, your grandmother is there with you, or your father, or whoever, right? It is because they are staying in the light place, and they are choosing to continue their work in spirit form. And so it is not at all different, really, particularly for animals that, fall under the category of like pet. But unlike humans that sort of go through that process where they're being drawn to the light, and they go through that sort of, it's like a clearing process, right? Where they're able to discard the things that they brought with them from physical form, whether that is ego or status or um, devastation, hurt, confusion. For animals, they just go from physical to being in the light. It's as simple as that. They don't go through any sort of that transition where they are moving towards the light, okay? I guess that's the easiest way for us to make that distinction for you. Once an animal has gone into the light, they will very often, particularly, we're talking about those who are pets and have been pets, they will very often connect with other members of, for example, your family, or other pets that they associated with when they were in physical form, who have also passed on. So in our case, we, when Skittles was passing, we were telling him to go find Crystal, right? Because they would connect. And then they connect and separate, or hang around, but that draw would have been those, previous. Very often, if a human companion passes and the animal lives on, when they pass and they move straight into the light, that human companion soul waits for them to welcome them back into the light. And that animal soul may, in fact, stay with them for a while, or it may sort of see that they're okay and they can move on, and then they move on. And whether they stay in the light for a while, or whether they, go back into that divine consciousness so they can start that reentry process. There has long been a lot of talk about, does a human soul, was it an animal? Was it, an insect? We're going to try to provide some clarity for that. So, a long, long, long time ago, eons upon eons upon the earth, when souls were first finding, exploring, understanding the physical form, there was a lot of sort of mixing, if you will, of animal and human, which is where in mythology you will often get creatures that are sort of half and half. This led to a very sort of unbalanced energy. And so there was a consciousness decision made that they would be separated, and they would stay separated, so that animal souls were animal souls and human souls were human souls. And that is the process by which, that separation and that distinction was created. Very often, it may surprise you or not to know that animal souls carry much more purity And they tend to carry a much higher vibration because they simply are in service. We can't think collectively. There isn't another way to say it. They're in service, whether they are in service to provide, in a very physical way, or whether are in service to love and to help heal and to connect and be part of a family. But they are in service, and as a result of that, they have actually a higher frequency or a more pure energy because they don't get caught up in the trappings of earth, right? They don't have an ego. They really don't incur karma in any significant way. So there really isn't a need for them to sort of go through a process where they may have to atone or gain clarity, unlike humans. So hopefully we have created some clarity there for you and not, made a mud pie of it. It is an interesting subject. There are all kinds of components that go into the human-animal connection. In a previous video, we discussed golden heart lines, and they are sort of these energy lines or ribbons that connect heart to heart, and they know no limits, they know no boundaries. So if there is a connection between two hearts, whether they're in this dimension or different dimensions, they're physically in the same place or not, that connection between the two hearts remains. And that connection also remains between an animal and its human companion. So we're hoping that that knowledge and that understanding and some of what we have said here bring you comfort. It is a loss when when we have to say goodbye to the animal or the animal leaves unexpectedly, because in many ways, the love that goes back and forth between, animal and human is in and of itself a higher form of vibration. It's a higher energy form. It's more pure.